Prior to Daniel Burnham's 1909 plan for Chicago, the city, in terms of design, was simply leftovers from the Industrial Revolution. The entire city was devoted to production and commerce. Prime riverfront property was lined with storage warehouses and commercial wharves. The beauty of the riverfront was severed from the city by railroad tracks. These factors, along with the natural curve of the Chicago River, formed a sort of half man-made, half natural barrier around downtown Chicago. Due to this, there was nowhere to build but up. This resulted in the formation of an urban jungle, replete with extremely high-density development and enormous skyscrapers. Though efficient in a purely utilitarian sense, it was not visually pleasing in the least. Chicago was a messy tangle of railroad tracks, streets, skyscrapers, and urban monotony. Chicago's financial leaders worried about the future of enterprise in such a city, and thus turned to Daniel Burnham for help. Burnham had proved himself as a capable solution finder in his 1893 World Fair, which he designed. He had also solved a similar problem on a smaller scale when his Macmillan plan of 1902 transformed the messy National Mall into a wondrous space. However, the actual city of Chicago never took any action against this negative architectural trend. However, the Commercial Club, a group of Chicago's leading businessmen, took matters into their own hands when they commissioned Burnham to solve the mess Chicago had become. Burnham revolutionized and completely rethought the city of Chicago. By viewing Chicago from a bird's-eye view, he worked with the city as a whole, rather than with the individual buildings. Burnham redesigned Chicago by redesigning the spaces in between the buildings, rather than redesigning the buildings themselves. He essentially opened up the constricted city. He extended piers into the lake to break from the barriers that used to confine the city. He called for broad streets and wide boulevards to give Chicago a better flow and to give a more open, less confining feeling. The 1909 Burnham plan for Chicago called for 6 major renovations. First, it called for the reconstruction of the Chicago riverfront. It also called for the construction of a riverside parkway and the development of Grant Park. Second, it called for the creation of a system of highways outside the city. Third, it called for an improvement of the existing railroad terminals. This suggestion led to the building of Union Station. Fourth, it called for the creation of a park system outside the city, which continued the Outer Belt Commission of 1903. Fifth, it called for the widening and smartening of the streets of Chicago, as to facilitate traffic flow. Finally, it called for an increase on the emphasis placed on civic and intellectual life. The 1909 Burnham plan for Chicago is particularly significant because it set the precedent for modern city planning. Cities nowadays take more factors into account rather than solely efficiency.